To start with, I must admit that this is the most horrifying experience I've ever had. I was scouring Craigslist in search of a new television and came across a 55-inch smart TV listed for $150. I contacted the seller, expressing my interest in the item, and he confirmed that it was still available. He invited me to come over and take a look at it, and provided his address. Upon checking the location, I realized that it was about a half-hour drive from my place, which was a bit further than I had hoped. Nonetheless, I decided to go for it, and even brought a friend named Mason along to ensure my safety. When we arrived at the seller's place, Mason stayed in the car while I went inside to check out the TV. The seller greeted me with a smile, shook my hand, and invited me to come inside to have a look at the TV. Although I was eager to make the purchase, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy about the situation. Despite Mason being nearby, I knew that his presence alone wouldn't be of much help if things took a turn for the worse. He asked me if I had brought anyone with me, and I responded with a hesitant no. When he asked why, I quickly replied that I sometimes get worried about meeting up with people because of bad experiences in the past. He seemed to understand and let out a chuckle, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a strange question to ask. To make matters worse, I noticed some faint yelling in the background. When I asked about the noise, he brushed it off and said it was probably just his two boys playing around in their bedroom down the hall. However, the yelling didn't sound like it was coming from where he pointed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't want to seem paranoid, so I dropped the subject and tried to make small talk instead. Despite my attempts to act normal, he could tell that I was on edge. He asked if I was okay, and I forced myself to respond with a reassuring "Yeah, I'm okay." In reality, I was anything but okay. He suggested that we go downstairs to check out the TV, explaining that it was set up in the guest bedroom so I could see that it worked properly. As he opened the basement door, he gestured for me to go first. Though I felt uneasy, I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid and began to descend the stairs. Suddenly, he shoved me from behind, causing me to stumble and tumble down the stairs. I was relieved to find that I hadn't broken any bones, but my head had taken a serious beating from hitting the wooden steps repeatedly. As I tried to gather myself and stand back up, I saw him standing over me with a crowbar, his expression dark and silent. Without warning, he swung the crowbar at my head, but I managed to dodge it by instinct. In a moment of desperation, I kicked him in the stomach and grabbed the opposite end of the crowbar that he was holding. With all my might, I struck him in the head, causing him to collapse to the ground in a heap. I wasted no time in making my escape, running up the stairs as quickly as I could while screaming for help and calling out Mason's name. As I left the basement, I heard someone else screaming for help, but I was too terrified to investigate any further. After the incident in the basement, I felt an urgent need to leave the house. I got into my car and drove off, all the while hyperventilating and trying to explain to Mason what had just happened. I mentioned to him that I suspected someone else might have been trapped down there, but I couldn't muster the courage to go back and investigate. We immediately called the police, who arrived on the scene promptly. I relayed everything that had transpired to the authorities, and Mason insisted that we return to the house to talk to the police in person. Although I was hesitant, I knew he was right. We arrived back at the house in under 10 minutes and were greeted by 3 police cars. We waited by the end of the driveway for one of the officers to come out and take our statement. The assailant was still unconscious on the ground when the police arrived, and he was subsequently handcuffed and taken to the hospital. I am not certain of all the charges he faced, but I do know that he will likely be incarcerated for a significant period, perhaps even for life, given his extensive criminal history. The investigation into his case is still ongoing. It was later discovered that the man had been keeping 2 other individuals locked in separate cages in the basement, which were no bigger than a typical dog's. He had been subjecting them to torture and who knows what else. I think about this every hour, and although my therapist helps me a lot, I am still severely affected by it. It haunts me every single day of my life, and I have been prescribed Prozac for my anxiety. I just wish all these thoughts, nightmares, and trauma would go away. Right now, every day it is a struggle for me, but I'm doing my best to remain optimistic. That's all I can do. In the past, I used to purchase various items like iPhones, video game systems, TVs, and more on Facebook Marketplace. Then, I would sell them on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a profit. This has been a side hustle for me for many years, and I have gained a lot of knowledge and experience from it. Typically, I would focus on flipping iPhones since they tend to have the highest profit margins. One time, over a year ago, I acquired an iPhone X for only $155, which was an exceptional deal. Surprisingly, many sellers are willing to negotiate their prices, and I managed to talk them down to a reasonable price. I listed the iPhone X for sale on Facebook Marketplace for $300, stating that I would consider the best offer. Since these phones usually sell quickly, I wasn't too concerned about receiving offers less than my asking price. Within an hour of posting the listing, a potential buyer reached out to me and expressed interest in the phone. We arranged to meet the next day in the late afternoon after she finished work. A few hours before our scheduled meetup at Walmart, she messaged me and asked if I could come to her house instead. Although I was initially concerned, I asked for her address to check the distance, and it turned out to be a 20-minute drive. Since she was paying the full price of $300, I agreed to drive to her house and asked her to let me know what time I should arrive. She was very grateful and thanked me excessively, even calling me a lifesaver for helping her out. She requested that we meet at 7:30 p.m., which I agreed to, but I wasn't thrilled about how late it was. The original plan was to meet in the late afternoon after she finished work, which I assumed would be around 4:30 to 6:00 p.m. at the latest. However, I still agreed because I was eager to sell the phone. I had to wake up early for work the next morning at 5 a.m., and I preferred to have some downtime before going to bed. The woman I was meeting didn't live in a neighborhood, but on a road off a main road in the city. While she had neighbors, the area had a slightly rural vibe. I left at 7:20 to ensure that she would be there when I arrived. I messaged her to let her know I was on my way, and that I would be there in about 20 minutes. When I knocked on the door, my anxiety spiked as I waited for someone to answer. It was starting to get dark, which didn't help. When the woman, Sabrina, opened the door, she introduced herself and invited me in. Her husband was sitting on the couch in the living room. Almost immediately, they started making fun of my clothes and appearance, trying to pass it off as a joke, but I sensed the passive aggressiveness. From the moment I walked in, something about them felt off, and I had a weird feeling. Sabrina seemed to be on some kind of drug, possibly hard drugs. She was acting strange and appeared high, with her eyes sunken in and her skin extremely pale. I sensed that something was not right, and she was not behaving like a normal person. In any case, the woman was impolite and somewhat demanding during my visit, arguing with her husband about how much she was willing to pay for the phone. I allowed them to inspect the phone, and Sabrina wanted to insert her SIM card into the phone before purchasing it to ensure that it would function properly. She then began to complain about a small crack on the phone, even though I had stated in the description that there was a small crack, and it was plainly visible in the images I had taken. She became agitated and accused me of attempting to defraud her, stating that she would only pay $200 for it. I immediately refused and asked for the phone back. I continued to negotiate, stating that I would not accept anything less than $250, and I made it clear that I would not accept anything less than that. She was not happy with this and took her SIM card out of the phone, throwing it at me with great force, hitting me in the face and causing the phone to fall to the hardwood floor and shatter the screen. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I inquired. She then went somewhere, presumably her bedroom, and I began screaming and crying hysterically. Her husband attempted to calm me down and offered me $100 to refrain from contacting the police. I accepted the $100, but refrained from contacting the authorities. Despite the temptation, I upheld my end of the agreement, but to be honest, I was already over the situation and didn't want to deal with it anymore. I can't fathom why anyone, especially a grown adult, would behave like that. People can be crazy. She was likely attempting to manipulate me by gaslighting and making me feel guilty to get what she wanted. She had promised to pay $300 before my arrival, which made me angry. Moreover, the crack on the phone screen that she was complaining about was minor, more like a scratch, and I ended up fixing it for around $70. I sold the phone for the full $300 a few days later. I've learned my lesson and will never again go to someone's house for a Craigslist transaction or meetup. Nowadays, I insist on meeting at a police station. One day, while endlessly browsing Craigslist, I stumbled upon the realization that people use the site for dating and making new connections. I was feeling particularly bored and lonely at the time, so I decided to peruse some of the listings. Among them, I came across a man named Tom, who caught my eye with his handsome looks and similar age of 32. I was 34. While I wasn't actively seeking anything specific, I am typically laid back and open to whatever may happen. Tom had a good vibe and appeared to be genuine, without the concerns of a potential catfish situation. We bonded over shared interests and eventually exchanged phone numbers, which was made even better since he lived less than 10 minutes away from me. After talking for a few days, Tom suggested that we meet up at a nearby bar that weekend. Excited about the prospect of a potential connection, I agreed to the date. Our conversations quickly became flirty, and the anticipation grew. On the night of our first date, we met at the bar and made small talk while enjoying good food and drinks. As the night progressed, I found myself having a lot of fun with Tom. As the night progressed, my feelings for this guy grew stronger, and I was starting to like him more. However, just as we were about to leave, I received a text from an unknown number with a threatening message. "Stay away from my man. You better not be there with him when I get there." Confused and concerned, I showed the text to him, but he brushed it off as if it was nothing and denied having any knowledge of it. Suddenly, he became very awkward and suspicious, seemingly eager to leave. As we were parting ways, his girlfriend arrived on the scene, revealing that he had been in a relationship the whole time. I was deeply upset by this revelation, and in my inebriated state, I didn't hold back when she started yelling at him and hurling insults at me. I began to yell back, but she became physical, throwing her shoe at me before attacking me with her purse and punching me. In an attempt to defend myself, I grabbed her hair, but before I could react further, I fell to the ground and hit my head on the concrete. The entire night was a mistake, and I still cannot believe that I found myself in such a situation. As a reserved and respectful person, the entire experience was completely outside of my comfort zone. I have no idea how his girlfriend found out about our plans or even how she knew we were at the bar together. However, I am grateful that she discovered us before I became too emotionally invested in him, and before I could experience any further heartache. That night, she was arrested and charged with assault, while I was fortunate enough to escape without any charges or jail time. However, I did suffer a severe concussion as a result of the altercation, serving as a stark reminder of why I will never again meet someone random from the internet. Fast forward to today, and I am engaged to my partner of 5 years. We are getting married next year and plan to start a family soon. I have never been happier, and I often share this cautionary tale with others as a warning about the potential dangers of meeting strangers online. The events of that night could have taken a much darker turn, and I am grateful to have learned such a valuable lesson from the experience. Thanks for watching. If you're a horror lover, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a spine-tingling story.